And risings, you beautiful people out there. How are you? We're going straight into it this morning. You shouldn't be getting any ads whatsoever on your screen right now, right? This should now be waiting for Sonia Poulton. Has it connected? Good morning. Good morning, all. Are we connected? Connect, yes, I think so. Excellent connection, according to this. Is it connected? Good morning. In a queue of 49. Good morning, Sonia. Where is Shin? Who's got that Friday feeling? Yes. But are we waiting? 9 o'clock. Waiting for Sonia Poulton. Oh, yes. Apparently we are here. See, this is what happens when you turn off the ads. It all gets a bit funny. It's working, Pink Nut Diamond. But the thing is I've turned off the ads today for a very specific reason. So you shouldn't, any of you, be receiving any ads today. And this is why. First of all, grand risings to you all. It is Friday, the 20th of September, 2024. We're now at 1 minute past 9 a.m. British summertime. Thank you for being here with us. I greatly appreciate it. So indeed do my glorious mods, Synchronized Soul, or rather Crazy Bunny and Soul Sound. Thank you so much. So yes, let me just say to you, first of all, so much has happened since Monday that today is one of those days when I bring you the type of news that frankly I rather wouldn't. But I've made the decision not to monetize today's show because today is about predators, famous predators who've been getting away with it because they are rich and famous. Today is also about the multitude of enablers who allow these predators to do what they do. And because we want to be able to discuss these issues, I have taken off monetization. And the big bonus, of course, is no ads. We need to be able to speak more freely about the grand scale of trafficking and abuse that is taking place around the world, and being monetized on YouTube doesn't allow me to do that. So there you go. Right, we had to take the hit on this one. It's worth it. I still have to stick by some guidelines when I'm having these discussions today, but not as rigid as when you are monetized. So says Red Sonia in my Arnie voice. Good morning to you, Stephen. Good morning. Morning from North Coast, Northern Ireland. Good morning to you all. Edwards, as in Huw Edwards. Absolutely. So, first of all, welcome to the show that believes you're a psycho if you think exploding pages are a genius tactic rather than the act of genocidal maniacs. And also, can I say, P. Diddy didn't kill himself. Just getting it in early, folks, because, well, you know, Epstein. Diddy, of course, is fine and dandy in a New York prison cell after he was arrested and denied a $50 million bail that he had put up. Talking about Epstein, is Diddy's freak out parties, which are the subject of a 14-page indictment, and why he was denied bail, are they the equivalent of the Epstein flight logs? So let's look at some of the famous predators we are going to be covering in our show today. Some convicted, some accused, and some too dared to do anything about it anymore. We're looking at BBC News presenter Huw Edwards. He was being sentenced while we were on air on Monday, and the result, although not surprising to people like me, created an outrage. I'll be looking at the fallout from an influential BBC star being involved with child abuse images and getting off with a mere suspended sentence. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, music executive P. Diddy, Love, or really just Sean Combs, which is his real name, arrested this week, charged with trafficking and more. I've read the indictment against him, and we will look at it in more detail later on in the show. And a whole lot of other music industry and Hollywood people are likely to be implicated in this. Put it this way, if he goes down, he's taken a whole lot of people with him. And I'll be joined by campaigner Joanna Brittan, who will be talking about her experience with former Harrods boss Mohammed Al Fayed, who, in light of revelations this week that 20 women have come forward to say he abused them, Joe has plenty to tell us about this man. And can I just say, first of all, thank you, Greg. That's very generous of you. I appreciate that. Good morning to Wee Fat Shug. You were actually numero uno last night, Shug, but this morning, A newbie on our live stream, people. Declan Waring. Morning, folks. First time listening live, or will be when it starts. Yay. Welcome, Declan. Declan. Welcome. Declan, rather. Welcome. Welcome to the live stream. And hello, unlawfully sacked care worker on X who said, looking forward to it. Love the variety of guests you have. Your show helps me get through my morning shifts. Thank you. And thank you. And thank you all for being here. Gorgeous people. We love seeing you already. Good morning, Baijan. I wonder if P. Diddy will be suicided in prison. That's what I say. He didn't kill himself. You know how it goes. And Robert Tideman, who aptly summed up this week in the chat earlier. Grand Rising, Sonia and friends. What a week. Pages exploding. Diddy done. Huw Edwards and Fogies. Presents for the joke of a prime minister and wife. Phew. I know, Robert. Quite a week. And the thing is, I have to be fair. I have to be straight here. And that is on Wednesday, I nearly did a live stream. I nearly did, because as the weeks go on, it becomes evident that twice a week probably isn't enough for us. But I'm going to have to work out how to juggle that. Anyway, that's a whole other story for a whole other time. Good morning, Hayden was here. How are you? Hello, Marshall. And Mimi, and see how we are living. You don't get to the top unless they've got dirt on you. They're all filthy. You're not impressed then, right? You're not impressed. And Stephen said, I won't miss another live now. Well, that's good to hear that. And good morning to you, Simon. And Healing the Silence. Healing the Silence birthday on Sunday, and has had some good news in terms of justice, which is absolutely great. And can I just say, shine so bright that even the devil has to wear shades when you're around. That's my attitude today. Oh, yes, it is. Thank you, Cavan. Beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Don't forget to say thank you when you look in the mirror, Sonia. That literally is a beautiful thing to say, isn't it? Really, when you think about it, it's like, thank you. Thank you. Appreciating yourself. I love that. Yeah, Mel's, it is. I don't know how I juggle at the moment. I should say that my nickname since very young is actually juggler. I've always been known as a juggler, which is why I think I probably got some kind of neurodiversity issue going on, because I can do lots of things at once. And I know that women famously can. And also another quote that I have to say, which is kind of guiding us today, and that is a Babe Ruth quote, right? American football hero. You just can't beat the person who never gives up. And that is us around here. Oh, yes, absolutely it is. And so shall we, we're going to bring in our first guest about 9:30. So I'm going to look in some detail before we go there at Huw Edwards, the whole fallout from it, everything that has happened around it. And there is so much to cover. But before we do that, have you seen the headlines? Have you actually seen the headlines? COVID didn't come from a lab leak. Scientists claim to have finally unearthed truth about origins of the pandemic. Guess what, people? They say it's a wet market after all. Without me getting a strike on YouTube, I'm sure my face will tell you what I think about that. And hello to 2000 DC on X for sending me a video of where he watches Wake Up. It's from his work warehouse. I loved it. And it really inspired me. It inspired me to say, please send me any images or short videos of where you watch Wake Up. Would love to publicize them on social media and on here. And a weekly spot, really, I think should be, where do you watch Wake Up? And thank you, 2000 DC on X, for inspiring me. See how organic this show is, peeps. I am inspired by you. Mick said, you know, Diddy is throwing the soap on the floor. Mick, I can't imagine what you mean by that. Diddy in the Love Club, said Simon. And Soul Sound wants to know who has not hit the like button yet. Good question, Soul Sound. Who has not, indeed? And I'm one of those mornings already. Let us start off with Huw Edwards. I think it's kind of the whole thing has like really resounded and resonated, because many people up to this week didn't realize that 8 out of 10 people involved in downloading and making child abuse images never go to jail. They do not have custodial sentences. And Huw Edwards, of course, I actually said on Monday, I really thought he was going down, because there is still 2 out of 10 that go down. And I thought he was going to, because he was so high profile. But apparently not. And I'm watching on the way to work. Pink Diamond is watching us on the way to work. Jilly, what did you laugh so hard when you saw? Mods and everybody, good morning to you, Annie. So let's talk about Huw Edwards, right? So on Monday, Huw Edwards walked out of court after admitting he made child abuse images of children as young as 7, category A. I don't need to go into details what that is, but you know it's as bad as it gets, right? And save for a pathetic suspended sentence, he is a free man. The message it sends to predators and vulnerable children simply could not be worse. Everybody and everything except Huw was blamed for him being a filthy pervert, from his wife and their difficult, problematic, troubled marriage to his mental health issues. I'm absolutely sick of perverts using the mental health card. I know you are. And newsflash, being depressed or being in a difficult marriage does not turn you into a nonce. Being a nonce makes you a nonce. That's it. That's it. That's the bottom line. And a lot of stuff has come out. One of the things that I mean, I've been looking at what Huw Edwards' colleagues have had to say about him, because suddenly everybody's speaking. There is, of course, an outpouring of anger. For many, as I say, this is the first realization that our system regarding this issue and children in general is absolutely broke. Huw Edwards sent £1,500 to a convicted paedophile who also wasn't jailed, who shared 41 child abuse images, as I say, of children as young as 7. And also Huw Edwards now is, despite his conviction, he is now free to retire on his BBC pension of £300,000. It's nice work if you can get it, isn't it? You're convicted of being a filthy predator, and yet you still get this fabulous gold-plated pension paid for by the public. Absolutely disgusting. The BBC bosses have major questions to answer to. Huw Edwards was rewarded by an industry that supports predators, perverts, and all-round odious individuals. BBC staff have now described being warned about thin-skinned Edwards when they started working there. And culture and media editor Katie Rizal at the BBC said that when she joined the corporation, she was given specific advice about how to handle Huw Edwards. You can be funny, she was told, but don't be funnier than Huw. You can be clever, but don't be too clever. And it's all this kind of stuff. And the problem is people like Huw Edwards I think he's probably a narc, right? At least. But they get rewarded for being absolutely reprehensible pieces of filth. They do. It's just disgusting. You couldn't get more establishment, by the way, than Huw Edwards. I've seen pictures of him where he's like fawning over the Queen and she's shaking his hand, he's bowing his head and all that kind of stuff. Don't forget, he was chosen as the BBC newsreader to announce the Queen's death. Big thing in broadcasting. And he was also chosen as the lead anchor for Charles's coronation. Again, a big thing in broadcasting. Obviously, me personally, I wouldn't want to do any of them. But for arsewipes like Huw Edwards, it's fabulous. It's a fabulous thing. Yes, it is. And the judge is Chief Magistrate Paul Goldspring. And shout out to Namaste Publishing, who contacted me and pointed out to me an article that they had, which covers the sentencing judge, Paul Goldspring, and his very interesting history. And Paul Goldspring is, he's like the highest of chief magistrates, right? He is absolutely at the top there. And he has, as Namaste Publishing pointed out to me, an interesting amount of cases behind him. And it's really interesting to see how his sentencing goes. And we must remember, this isn't just down to him. This is down to sentencing guidelines. So even though many people I'm spitting because I'm so angry already. So even though many people are angry with the judge, it's not just about the judge. It's about the way that the sentencing system is set up. But let us look at Paul Goldspring, right? And he's a man who set a Satanist free, a Satanist teenager from Gloucestershire who had downloaded 11 different terrorist manuals, escaped a jail sentence after Paul Goldspring heard he was on a course to get straight A's in his A levels. Well, that's nice, isn't it? District Judge Paul Goldspring told the youth he had planned to sentence him to 12 months in custody, but had changed his mind. That's very nice of him, isn't it? And also, the Queen appointed Paul Goldspring, by the way, to be a senior district judge, aka Chief Magistrate, on the advice of the Lord Chief Justice of England. And Paul Goldspring is also the man who found the man guilty of, in York, of throwing an egg at King Charles. That's another thing. But I think one of the most interesting things that Paul Goldspring has been responsible for is he was the judge who formally approved the extradition of Julian Assange to the United States. Of course, Julian Assange is now free, but it was Paul Goldspring initially who was the judge who formally approved that extradition that Julian Assange had to appeal against not being able to appeal and various other things. And eventually he's free. So Paul Goldspring has a very interesting history indeed. And also, by the way, he sentenced. Do you remember when Chris Whitty was kind of accosted, jokey, like take a picture, take a selfie by two guys? Well, Paul Goldspring sentenced one of those lads who had learning difficulties to 8 weeks in jail for accosting Chris Whitty. But Huw Edwards can download, receive, and make child abuse images that involve 7-year-olds and walk out of court scot-free with a £300,000 pension. Something's wrong, right? You can see why I've had to take monetization off today, because something is seriously wrong and we need to be able to call it out. And can I just say that the BBC, as we all know, is a big club. And it's a big club that is clearly harbouring predators, has done for a very long time. This is not news for viewers out there, not at all. And we cannot forget that famous statue outside Broadcasting House, created by Eric Gill. And Eric Gill raped his children, raped his sisters, raped the family dog. People hate that statue. They've attacked it. It is of a man holding a boy. I think it's Prometheus. And Eric Gill even elongated the child's penis on the statue. Nude image of a child being held back by an adult man. Right. And the BBC have doubled down on that. Even though that statue has been attacked, the BBC have doubled down on it. They've doubled down on their support of it. It's staying. And what's more, they've brought in security to protect it. You know what? It has to go. It has to go. While that statue remains, it tells us that the BBC is unsafe for children. Defund the BBC. Defund the BBC. And while we're all upset about what is going on re Huw Edwards, let us also look at the words and works of these child experts, right? Let me start with a personal favourite of mine, simply because I've observed him for over a decade. His name is Jim Gamble. James Gamble is a British former police officer, head of Belfast region for the now disbanded RUC Special Branch. He was head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Command, CEOP, in the United Kingdom until 2010, and is now CEO of the Inequi Safeguarding Group. And honestly, I had to say to MSM this week on social media, do you know the history of Jim Gamble? The expert who is across all of mainstream media commenting on Huw Edwards and being outraged. Why isn't he in jail? The law has to change. And saying the reason, going on about the reason we are not deterring people from offending is that sentencing is too soft. Anyone who makes, possesses or distributes a video of a child being raped should go to prison. No ifs, no buts. Well, I agree, Jim. Unfortunately, that's not your former stance. Because back in 2007, a mere 3 weeks after you'd got involved in the Madeleine McCann case, incidentally, you, Jim Gamble, were calling for these people, these same people who download child abuse images, not to be in prison, but instead you wanted them to be cautioned by the police and for them to be treated. I've got the newspaper articles. I put them on social media. What you actually said at the time in 2007 was, if someone is at the beginning of a spiral of abuse where there is evidence to indicate during the investigation that this person may well benefit from a police caution and be managed, then of course that needs to be done. I have a long memory, Jim Gamble, and you feature in it. And you're fake as. And I asked some of my followers on social media, because you long blocked me, I asked some of my followers on social media to send you my tweets and ask you what was going on, Jim, because I am so sick of experts saying whatever just to be relevant. Because arguably, this is a man who's been involved in child safeguarding at the highest level. And as far back as 2007, he was saying, let them go, let them go. And suddenly it's bang them up. Yes, Tamsin, they just jail people for tweets and they don't jail people for abusing children. What the? I agree with you. Anyway, Jim Gamble said, experience changed me. Yeah, but Jim Gamble, right? When you, back in 2007, you were still an experienced cop. You were still somebody who was experienced and had an understanding about child safeguarding. So I'm not buying it, right? I'm not buying it. And, you know, talking about these experts, by the way, he's not alone. He's far from alone. A so-called expert in children. There are others, the other child experts. Let me get this right. There are other child experts who've also said really deeply questionable things in the past. And I'm going to put the spotlight on a Dr. Huw Edwards. He's featured rather prominently in the Lucy Letby case. And big shout out to the Lucy Letby witch hunt on X, who pointed out about Huw Edwards' former past, right? Latterly, as I say, he's become more famous for the Lucy Letby case, but in previous times, he was commenting as a paediatrician on child sexual abuse, and he made the argument for the decriminalisation of it. Yes, he did. An article in the South Wales Evening Post on November the 19th, 1990, in which Dr. Evans he was at this kind of conference and he was quoted as saying, right, so this is about decriminalising these kind of child abusers. Dr. Evans described it as a highly charged issue and said there was an argument for decriminalising sexual offences against young children. These are people who do not consider they have done anything wrong, and you can't cancel someone who feels he has done nothing wrong, he said. What? So let me get it straight. So just because somebody is so psychotic or sociopathic, they don't realise that what they're doing is wrong, we should let them get on with it and not criminalise them. Now, I realise this was from 1990, and I want to know where Dr. Huw Edwards stands on that now. So today I'll be sending him this clip and ask him for an update, and let us hope he's changed his mind, because that's two experts now from the past who have shown decidedly worrying, troubling attitudes towards children. And let us not forget, this is a long drive to lower the age of consent. And I'm not suggesting that Huw Edwards or Jim Gamble are involved in that. But I also put a video on social media this week, and it was of me from 11 years ago on This Morning with Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield. And we were talking about reducing the age of consent because this bat crazy barrister, Barbara Hewson, had come out and she was saying we need to lower the age of consent so that older people were not criminalised. Like, literally, she wanted to legitimise child rape, right? Barbara Hewson, by the way, cousin of Bono, lovely Johnny Vedmore did a real deep dive on her. Absolute psychopath. She's now dead. She was a major pusher of paedophile policies. She worked endlessly to have the age of consent reduced. She used to send me drunk legal letters in the middle of the night. So that was what that debate was about. And actually, it was very interesting because what you find is me telling Philip Schofield about the paedophile information exchange and Holly Willoughby, of course. KB, Emma, no way. What's going on? Oh, my post on why I love Sonia and the fire in her belly to get the truth. What was that about, Kath? Bless you. Bless you. Peter Folder, Hewson was a monster. Absolutely, she was a monster. You know what they say, you shouldn't speak bad about the dead, right? Yeah, but I spoke bad about her when she was alive. So, because she was vile, she was disgusting. She trolled survivors of child abuse. And I mean, you have to wonder why somebody is so invested in having the age of consent reduced. I mean, perhaps they've got a dog in the race, one would wonder. But as I said, this is a long-term plan. They've been doing this for at least 40 years. They've been attempting to reduce the age of consent so that they can legalize raping children. I mean, I'm not making this up. I'm absolutely not making this up. So now there's a whole big thing. You have people like Tom Tugendhat, the MP, who wrote to the Attorney General, Lord Richard Hermer, saying that Huw Edwards' sentencing needs to be looked at, but Tom got all of the kind of law details wrong. It was in a magistrate's court, it wasn't in a county court. Nothing is going to change. Yes, HK Very, Harriet Harman Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt, and Harriet Harman's husband, whose name escapes me and who is now dead, they were working for the NCCP, right? The National Council of Civil Liberties, right? For NCCL. And NCCL was supporting the paedophile information exchange, which a whistleblower said the paedophile information exchange received Home Office funding, which the Home Office denied, but I don't believe them. Why should I believe a Home Office that protected paedophiles in its midst? Don't believe them. So the bottom line is that Huw Edwards got away with it. He got away with it. And what's worse, not worse, is this, I mean, equally as bad, is that politicians will now use this to enable their continuation of online censorship plans. And I say that because at Edwards' sentencing, the Internet Watch Foundation led the charge for more powers to censor WhatsApp for action from Ofcom, the media regulator. I think we can all see where this is going, people, because Huw Edwards received his images of, received those images on WhatsApp. So now they're going after WhatsApp. It's always the same, isn't it? It's always the same. Always the same. Randy, age of consent in DK is 15. Where's DK? Wait, is that Denmark? And yes, Mick wants to know how Schofield lived with himself, lying to his wife and kids for all that time. What a lovely man. Yeah, didn't he say that he knew on his wedding day that there was a problem, And I mean, basically, let's be real now. His wife was his beard. That's the reality. Yes, Shug. They create the construct upon which they claim to be acting on. What's going on? They're all getting away with it, says Gilla. Yes, they are. And it's wrong. And we hate it. Good morning, Kat. Pi used Swansea and Cardiff University for conferences in the 1970s. Funny that, Hugh. Interesting. See how we are living. James, I love that. He got away with it, but he won't get away with it spiritually. I hear you, brother. I hear you. I mean, I don't think there is any escaping, right? So horrible, an absolute travesty. And you can absolutely see why I had to demonetize this video today, because we are going in today. My next guest, Joanna Brittan, she's going to talk about her encounter with Mohammed Al-Fayed. And there's lots of questions about that and why that's suddenly now come to prominence. But Jo is going to help me understand this. So let's bring her in. I think let us bring her in and make sure she's here and all fine and dandy. Jo, it's connecting to audio any second. She should be up. Asked to start video. The usual stuff, isn't it? How are you? What's the weather like where you are? Here she is. The very glorious Joanna Brittan. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Sonia. Good morning. Sorry, I'm not very techie, so yeah.
Join the club. Join the club, love.
Internet is not all that, but anyway.
You're absolutely fine. You're absolutely fine. We can see you beautifully. We can hear you beautifully. Just keep it exactly like that, and that is absolutely wonderful, Jo. We are monetized around here, as you know, but today I took monetization off because the type of topics that we need to discuss, YouTube would not allow us, not if I was monetized. And we need to drill down on these predators, whether that is Huw Edwards, whether that is Puff Daddy, or whether that is Mohammed Al-Fayed. And you have joined us to talk about Mohammed Al-Fayed, former Harrods boss, of course, accused of rape with 5 female ex-employees. 20 people have come come forward that we know of, carried out the attacks during his time in charge of Harrods between 1984 and its sale in 2010. And of course, either side of that as well, because we only know as much as we know, right? But Joe, you are a formidable campaigner. You've been campaigning for a very long time about the abuse that takes place in boarding schools because your brothers were abused. The work you've done regarding Sherborne Prep is outstanding. I take my hat off to you. I've interviewed you a number of times, but you also had an encounter with Mohammed Al Fayed, and it's an important one. And you knew that this BBC documentary was happening way before anybody else did because they kept it all under wraps, didn't they, Joe? So this BBC documentary is now out alleging all these things about Mohammed Al Fayed. Of course, he died last year. Why did they keep it so secret, Joe?
Well, I started working on it about 5 years ago with Keaton.
Keaton
And
Stone, he's the director.
Keaton Stone's the director, yes, and his wife. He explained in the documentary that she was needing to do her CV. She was employed at Harrods in the chairman's office for 3 or 4 years at the same time that I was employed by my employer. So she remembers the man who raped me, and she remembers the toys that I saw on Al Fayed's lawn at Oxted when I was trafficked to him. So this is the sort of survivor connection, which is incredibly helpful. And you can only get it. So I did it with Sherborne. I got all the testimonies. I sent them to the police, connected the survivors with a lawyer. And then so it's rather like the post office, you need the group.
You absolutely do. And it can take years for that to happen. But
Yeah,
once it happens, all the pieces.
Till
Yes.
ICSA, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Until that happened, I was doing that since 2008. So this effort's been, I think, I first went to the police in 2017 in December when Channel 4 Dispatches made
About Mohammed Al Fayed.
Yeah, and about 20 women came forward then. And recently I met Cheska in a garden centre.
Who's
and
Cheska?
Cheska's the first woman who ever spoke to camera about Al Fayed. She's an actress and a gallery owner who lives in Wiltshire. And it just happened that I was going near her. But it's very, very difficult for survivors to connect and physically meet because there's so much fear, especially in this case. NDAs, threats to life. We know where you live. We've got the top lawyers in this country. I had to sign 2 NDAs. Just the amount of fear in this case is extraordinary. It's not this. I don't know if it could be compared to Sherborne, but until Lindsay died in 2016, and ICSA, it got listed at ICSA. There's something about the death of a predator which lifts the fear and allows survivors to come forward.
And this, I think, we need to get in on, right?
In both.
Right. Now, people are very cynical about why this documentary has suddenly come out this week because they don't know the background to it, but they're very cynical that why has it come out this week when all the stuff is happening about Huw Edwards, the BBC's major star, right? And can it be trusted because it's through the view of the BBC? How do you respond to that?
So I started working with Keaton, who approached me on a direct message because I've been so loud on Twitter. Like I was with Sherborne, I have no legal protection then from Alexis J, although the victims were legally protected because they become core participants. And the same with this, when you connect a survivor, they normally get legal protection. They're in touch with the journalists, etc., to tell their story. And if you're making a documentary, then there are necessarily legal protection for the company making it. So the survivors have the same kind of protection. But as a whistleblower and being slightly outside it, and being the loudest person on Twitter to enable the survivors to come forward, connect, and then I'll forward them to the producer. That's really brave work. And, there's no protection for me. I find it quite, there's a certain heartlessness about it. Anyway,
there is a heartlessness about it.
Because I'm so
address
outraged.
That cynicism, Joe, because that's a big block for people. Address that cynicism. I've seen it on Twitter. You even tagged me, and people are like, "Why is this happening now?" It's a big block for people. Is this a legit documentary?
Yes, it is, and it's because Keaton, he explains about his wife, and he was doing her CV, and the heading of the CV, it's in the Radio Sounds I was listening to. It's a 5-part podcast, but he'd done his CV, and the top line of her CV was, PA to chairman in the chairman's office of Harrods, and she didn't want to be defined by that. And it was really upsetting because she's kind of hidden it. And so he, because if he loves her, keeps digging and digging for the truth about what the hell happened there.
Yeah.
And then the more he dug, the more he saw it's the spider's web going everywhere.
Yes.
So he reached out to me, and this is way before the BBC were ever involved.
Right.
That Cassie, the producer, only connected about 2 years ago. She maybe even, I don't know how long, but I think I'd been working with Keaton for at least 3 years, connecting survivors before anybody stepped in. It wasn't a BBC thing. And
so I think the other thing,
they've done a great job, and also I want to say courage to the women speaking out.
Absolutely. But the other thing, of course, you've alluded to it already, and I think it's an important one, and that is, why do we have to keep allowing these people to die off before we can really take action?
It makes me so cross. These 3 predators. So the guy who raped me, Ahmed Abadli, who was the top UAE he set up the embassy of the UAE and a medical practice that was doing the same sexual health testing in Harley Street. And I think perhaps Fayed learnt a lot of his behavior, his MO, from Abadli, because he was in London longer in the 60s. But anyway, he was the guy who trafficked me to Oxted.
What do you mean when you say traffic to Oxted?
Okay, so his date of birth is 1928, same as Robin Lindsay, same as Ahmed Abadli, same as Al Fayed, although Al Fayed lies and says he was born in 1933. They're all really geriatric rapists and sexual predators. And they have this fiefdom. And it's the same fiefdom that Robin Lindsay had in Sherborne as Fayed has with Harrods. So they're living above the law. They have got all these enablers, and everybody knows. Everybody in Sherborne knew, the big schools knew exactly that they were accepting broken children, abused children from this prep school. You can see it in the report.
Yeah. I'm going to keep bringing you back to Mohammed Al Fayed, my darling, because we're going to confuse viewers otherwise.
Living above the law, all the enablers, all the women who arranged for the PAs to have sexual health testing in Harley Street.
Right, stop there. Stop there, Joe. Stop there. That is so egregious. Young women were being sent to private practices in Harley Street to be sexually tested for Mohammed Al Fayed. Expand on that for us.
So I was too, and I did a video interview for the police in Torquay, saying that their sex trafficking department needs to look at this, because it could still be happening today. This was 71 Harley Street, and it was the UAE's medical practice. So they have diplomatic immunity. But the doctors that Fayed was using were all in Tom Bower's book, which was published in 1998. The names of the doctors, Anne Coxon, I think it was, they were different from the people. They were Egyptian doctors who conducted that on me. And I had a recruiter waiting in a limousine outside in the car. And it was sold as a perk of the job, private medical insurance, as a PA. But it was actually, there was no, like Cheska said, she expected a full medical. So blood, pressure, lungs, just standard, but a full gynecological examination and all blood tests for AIDS. And mostly it was AIDS, I think, and then STDs.
Right.
And then the reports getting back to Mohammed Al Fayed before she'd even got back to the office, the youngest one.
Absolutely grotesque. So talk to her. So when you said you were trafficked to Oxted, you were sent to Oxted, which was one of Mohammed Al Fayed's big houses, right? Which he was famous for having parties at, right? But you have a blank of memory about what took place at Oxted, don't you? Tell people.
Well, so basically my whole ordeal was 4 or 5 months, and it was when the Gulf War broke out. So I was kind of traumatized anyway. Came back to London from Qatar, where my father was flying in the Gulf War. Got this job for the UAE royal family. So we were in Hans Crescent, right behind Harrods, and we had so much to do with Harrods. All the private planes would fly Harrods product to Abu Dhabi. So I worked for Sheikh K, and Zayed was the oldest man, Sheikh K. So we weren't even allowed to mention him. He was just called K. And this was called Holbein Anstalt. And we handled all the property of the UAE royal family. That's what our office was. And my boss held the purse strings of everything they bought, which was exposed by Harry Davies in their 5.5 billion, after the Panama Papers, property empire in London. And my boss was always with Al Fayed, and basically I was taken to the south of France, to Cannes, to help buy property, look at property for them, because of the Gulf War. They were they were afraid, and they were buying up property. And then after that, there was an issue with the mayor of Cannes, so I was taken to the Ritz in Paris with a Bailey. And it was constant. There was one rape attempt, constant sexual harassment, like the women
Were you at
described.
this point?
I was 25.
Right. So you were
It
still
was
very
one of,
young.
yeah, I'd been working at the British Embassy in Doha, so I understood diplomatic community. And one of the reasons I was recruited, because I had a degree with French, they wanted a multilingual PA to help. So these meetings were in French with these lawyers in this sort of boardroom in the Ritz. And then I was we went back to London, and I'd lost my where I was staying, because it was sort of everything was quite emergency, because I'd didn't have any roots in London. I'd been working in Doha. So a Bailey said, you can stay in my house, which was in 4142 Rutland Gate, opposite Harrods. And in fact, the BBC have got a press conference about two streets away from where I was raped this morning with
Today.
all the
Yeah,
today. Yeah,
absolutely.
so it's going to be
Absolutely.
on national
I'm
news. And
very aware that time is pressing, so I'm going to keep
sorry.
you on the straight and narrow here, my
Yeah.
darling Joe. Talk to
So,
us
so
about Oxted.
yeah, so in the end, so he was completely germophobic, Bailey, like Fayed, and I'd been sexually health tested, and in the interview I called it premeditated rape, for an employer to do that. And Holbein Anstalt are right next to the Dorchester Hotel, are still in business. So I was eventually raped in a back bedroom, which was like a maid's quarters. It was like a mattress on the floor, and I was told I wasn't allowed to use the front entrance of the property. I had to use this rear entrance in Montpellier Walk, so I wasn't really seen. So it was like, I suppose, you wouldn't say sex slave, but I don't know how to describe it. It was
It's
just
very
worn
difficult.
down.
So,
It's worn down over
Joe,
about 5 months.
Joe, Joe, I
Yeah.
understand this is really difficult. There's a whole lot of detail here, but the
No,
problem is
no,
we
yeah.
will lose people if because they don't know the whole story. So I need to just keep you in a
Yeah.
straight line on this, right? And that is, who
Okay.
sent you to Oxted to see Mohammed Al Fayed?
So the recruiter, the one who recruited me, said, Bailey had to get rid of me, because she knew a lot about the family. She'd been working there for a long time, and she felt threatened by me. He said, "Oh, I've got to get rid of you." So he took me up to the top of Harrods 3 times to meet Fayed, and they speak in Arabic together, and I don't speak Arabic, although I've lived in Qatar, since the age of 7, in my boarding school holidays. My parents were there for 50 years. Um, I know I'm being talked about, but I don't know what they're saying. And after 3 of these meetings, and I'm going up to the top of Harrods with this, I feel like, I've been raped is written across my forehead.
Oh
I'm going
dear.
up the escalators, and you've got all the security up there, guns everywhere, and you've got these PAs who look so polished. And I'd come out of a war zone. My clothes weren't all that, and I certainly didn't have labels, and I just felt so vulnerable. And when I was kind of in these situations, I was trying to be professional as a PA, and this has already
Understood.
happened to you. So I had to
Understood.
clear my desk, sign a second NDA, and then I was put in a Bailey's limousine and driven and he wouldn't say after the second NDA, and he'd said, I've got to get rid of you, where he was taking me. I thought I was going to be put on a flight out of Gatwick to the UAE to disappear me. And he turns into this driveway, and it's Oxted. And he says as we drive in, oh, we've been invited for lunch. And so Fayed greets us, and we walk in, and we have lunch at this long, long table. Fayed sitting at the top of the head of the table, a Bailey next to him, and I'm opposite a Bailey. And most of the time they're speaking Arabic. And it was pasta. I remember the details of so much of this day.
That happens.
I remember the weather, the men in combat gear in trees, like hiding in bushes and stuff. It was
Weird.
so bizarre.
Weird.
And if you're a VIP guest, you'd be quite
Joe,
impressed by the security.
Yeah, no, Joe, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. So why do you feel that you have a blank of memory?
Trauma. There's just too much trauma.
But so do you think something was given to you?
Possibly. A lawyer asked me that at the dinner. Sorry, at the lunch. So after, I'll tell you what my last memory is, because so many of them are really clear.
Right.
After lunch, we go out onto the lawn, and Fayed's got this huge marquee full of telephones. I've never seen so many telephones in one place. And what he's on the lawn, there's 20 electric cars from Harrods, all brand new in a line.
Wow.
And Sophia had ordered them from the toy department, but not seen them. And so this is the way survivors, when they connect, they can corroborate. Anyway, the kids come back from school with a Filipino nanny, and Fayed introduces me to all of these four kids, sorry, because Omar's still a baby. He's been carried as their new nanny. And I'm like, because at the lunch, he says to me, Joanna, what do you want to do? And because I don't know where, I don't feel safe. So I pitch for my life, and I say, well, and I remember this pitch. I was so desperate. And I said, well, I've got a degree in Russian. I spent a year in Russia. I was friends with the ambassador and his sons. I'd been nightclubbing with them. I could be a buyer of Russian things for Harrods. I thought, really valuable antiques, icons for whatever, caviar, because that was part of my degree. So I had these connections. And I thought, well, I could work for Harrods. And then they start speaking Arabic again, and that's dropped. And then I'm introduced as the nanny, as the new nanny.
But you didn't become the nanny, did you? You didn't become the nanny.
No, I think he wanted that for his children. He wanted them to speak the way I speak.
Yes.
Take my voice from me.
Yes, that estuary English.
And
yes,
that's when I lost my memory. Well, boarding Sherborne bloody English. That's the legacy of Sherborne.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't know whether you were abused or not on that day.
No, I have no idea. I don't know how I escaped. And the next memory I have was being at my mother's wedding, and I've got a picture of me at the wedding wearing clothes I think a Bailey bought me in Cannes, and sort of standing aloof from my mother. And I never, because I'd signed a second NDA, they threatened my life if I ever spoke about it, that I didn't even tell my mother, and I didn't want to spoil her happy day. And I'm boarding school educated, so I wasn't gonna, you know what I mean?
It was beat into you.
It was beat into you. And I never mentioned it until Cheska spoke out to camera. I'd compartmentalized it and been a mother in Totnes, where I live in Devon, to my children.
Yeah.
I completely pushed it down.
So here's the thing, Joe. The thing is that you and I know that people have been speaking out for a very long time, because some people are like, people only want to make money now he's dead. But the truth is, there have been a series of exposés. Vanity Fair, ITV's The Big Story. There was a police report, right? Channel 4's dispatches, Channel 4 news investigation. There's been a series of exposés, but he did what rich people always do, and that is he uses his very expensive libel lawyers to frighten the pants off people, right? That's what Mohammed did. And also, Joe, one of the things that you say, which we've got no proof of, but one of the things that you say is that he was Princess Diana's handler. Why do you say that?
Well, I say I was in the Lion's Den when I was at Oxted, and I could feel the character of Al Fayed and the danger I was in.
Right.
And she was there at Oxted with her sons before they were flown to the south of France. You see it in the Netflix. And when she's introduced to her 4 children, it's so triggering for me. They're in the pool. I don't know if you remember,
I
but
remember the
Al
scene.
Fayed
Yeah.
introduces Diana to his 4 children. And I was like, oh my God, there was so much that was triggering about that, and no reference whatsoever to his character. And Sophia says, it's not okay for him to continue to have that legacy of, what's the word? With impunity, to die with impunity
I
and
know. Well, he
not
was
have his
portrayed as
legacy
the great
tarnished.
charmer, the great charmer. I mean, he had
Have a bloody Christmas. Sorry
yeah,
to
but
swear.
no, the thing is that obviously he had huge royal connections until he didn't. And
Yes.
he was obviously one of the last people who was responsible for Diana before her death. She was involved with his son. It was his chauffeur in whose car she died. And that was Mohammed Al Fayed's. And so, but you think this man was just protected, and the only reason this can all come out now is simply because he's dead.
That's one of the reasons. But if you look at the security and some of the very high, the people who made the threats, like John McNamara, he's dead. um, and the police, like my police file, I went to the police in 2017, the day Cheska spoke out, and I've not stopped. My police file of complaints about cover up is much thicker than Sherborne. It's the same thing. It's Cheska says she knew at least 3 times when the police shut it down. When survivors were coming forward, I was told that my complaint about being trafficked to him would flag up if anybody else came forward. I've got proof that didn't happen. It didn't flag up. It was all squashed. And there was so much fear around it that some of the survivors would kind of be very tentative in coming forward. And then, and the men, and the security, they'd kind of worry for their careers or whatever and step back again. And I think with the death, it just meant that the fear dropped away and people could connect and come forward and make a documentary like this. But it should not be, sorry, it's so hard to talk like this off the cuff.
You're doing
It should not
amazing,
be
Joe. You're doing absolutely amazing. You and I,
women to speak
Joe.
out,
Let me just say
finally.
this, Joe. Let me just say, I don't know if you can hear me completely. You're doing amazing. You and I know each other well enough for me to be able to say, stop right there. Let's get this a little bit more straight and everything. We've worked together for a very long time, and I know that you have taken on board so much, and sometimes it becomes overwhelming. I know it does. But I think that this documentary is important. But just yet again, I just wish more could have been done while he was still alive.
Yes,
And
I
that's
know.
the
That's so
frustration.
frustrating. I could not have tried harder, Sonia.
I know you couldn't.
So you have people like that shelling on Twitter, like, stand in my shoes. I'd like to see what you could have done more than me
Right.
to try and get the guy jailed, or, try to. I think I was the loudest person on Twitter. If you search up Al Fayed hashtag or whatever, there's me yelling for years
Absolutely.
about this.
Absolutely. Joe, I'm going to have to let you go just because time is marching on.
Thank you
But
so much.
is there anything, any parting shot you want to leave us with? I think everybody understands that this is extremely emotional for you. This is, it's hard. It's like a
really hard day
realization.
yesterday. I never thought it would happen. In fact, it came out without fanfare because they were so afraid of it being pulled at the last minute. That's why it was everybody was kind of a bit taken by surprise, but we weren't. We've been waiting for it, for knowing it was going to come out. And the relief that it actually did, even up to the day before, I thought it might be pulled. And there was so much fear of not being able to speak about it. So it's a huge relief. And my parting shot would be courage, to underline the courage of all those women who spoke out, spoke to Keaton, and at this lawyers' conference, they're connecting. And I'm so grateful they're connecting. I'd say that Survivor Connection is everything. They're like jigsaw puzzle pieces, so you can see the bigger picture, what his MO was, and who enabled him. And I hope they go after those enablers. They're like the staff at Sherborne Prep.
Let me read you some of these messages, Joe. I didn't look at any of the messages when I was talking to you because I wanted to focus on you because I know how difficult this is, but I've got to read you some of them. Cavan says, you're brilliant, Joanne. Just be you. Lisa says, Joe, thank you so much for telling your story. You were so brave, so much healing coming your way. Are you all right there, sweet? This is why I love this woman. Now I'm going to start crying. Now I am literally, you're going to get me crying,
You have to
right?
be so
Because
strong to carry everybody, and I think with the exposure it's taken, that carrying, it's less now. I don't have to carry it so much. It's such a fucking weight, Sonia. It's horrific.
I, I wish I could leap into this screen and hug you right now. I really do. I really do. Gila says, bless you, darling. I'm so proud of you. Be happy says, Joe, you are an amazing lady. You are helping bring down the veil. Yes, you are. Yes,
Thank you.
you absolutely are. Do you know what? All that fluff and stuff. It is so hard to interview a soul so sad. It really is. Bless Joe to find some peace. It is. Randy is crying with you right now, dear Joanne. Go gently, Joe, says Marsh Girl. Strength and love to you, Joe. Can you see why we had to do
So
today's show the
lovely.
way we did it? Because exactly this. Mel's is feeling you. Ali is feeling you. Everybody, Joe, crying along with you. Joe is a warrior, said Unforeseen. Exactly that. Peter says, thank you for speaking out, Joe. Joe, I love you so much. Everybody, Joanna Brittan is
Thank you
one of the
so
most courageous people that I know who is campaigning for survivors of child abuse. And she's even got me very emotional here today, but I love
Some of
her
those
to
women,
bits.
I mean,
Every
some of those women
story,
were children,
do you know what?
some of the victims were children, which makes Mohammed Al-Fayed a paedophile. That
Cherry
doesn't, not actually said, but I'm campaigning against child abuse in this case as well.
Joe, you have to read these messages when you come offline. And if you're able to, just pop a comment in the chat if you feel like it. But the support for you is just absolutely huge, as it should be. And Lisa said, your crying shows your wounds and your humbling vulnerability. We all send you so much love. And Marie says, much love to you, brave Joe. And it goes on and on like that. Everybody, this is the truly formidable Joanna
Oh,
Brittan. Take good care of yourself, darling. God bless you.
you're a warrior. Love
You're
you, so.
amazing. We love you, darling. We love you. Take care, Joe. Take good care of yourself.
Hi, everybody.
Bye. And that is Joanna Brittan. How painful is that story? Robert is crying for you. Standing ovation for Joanna Brittan, says Soul Sound. Much love. It's Friday. TD. Such a beautiful soul, says Sass1. And I know Joe well, which is why I was absolutely aware that we were on a knife edge, that anything could have happened at any moment in time, which is why I kept, working just to keep her moving forward on it, because it's hard. It's really hard, but I love her to bits. She is amazing. God bless Jo. She's doing such a great job exposing this awful man or news, says Catherine. And I will absolutely, Crazy Bunny. I absolutely will check in on her after the show. Randy needs a beer already. I gave you all a heads up, darlings. I know it's a difficult show today, and I don't think that I know we can't avoid it, which is why I made those kind of executive decisions I did about today's show, is because we just have to face it head onwards, don't we? What we're dealing with, the kind of level of predators and what they use to silence people. Praying for peace for Joanne, says everybody. And I hear that. And thank you, Soul Sand. I appreciate that. Um, and B said, and what we're seeing in Joe right now is an adult survivor of a monster, the same as all Huw Edwards victims who will be fighting for decades to manage the damage. Yes, Pink Diamond, I absolutely do have a higher standard of guest aftercare than ITV, than probably most of them. I will make sure 100% she's all right, but she knows that she can come to me and she knows that I will help her. She's formidably strong. She's taken on the boarding school system, and it's been really hard. Her brothers were abused in boarding schools. And the problem is about the boarding school system is that it is also part of the establishment. And some of those establishment people don't want it to be known that they were at boarding schools where there were paedophiles and abusers. TD says every child victim ends up a broken adult. How they can do this and still get away with it makes me sick. Yes, Mick, it is a roller coaster of emotions, this show today. It is. And actually, I'm going to take you shortly in a completely different direction before we return back to kind of like the theme of the show. But I wanted to slightly change it a little bit. And I'm going to bring in a guest who's actually going to talk to us about the inspiring work he's doing with very vulnerable people who have kind of been written off by society and how he's finding them work. Lovely Claire is in the comments. Joanna is a star. Claire, you are also a star. Claire in the comments is a formidable anti-child abuse campaigner and has been for a very long time. Claire was one of Barbara Hewson's targets, and Claire stood up to Hewson. Claire is also formidable. I am surrounded by incredible, formidable people. I really am. And I'm so very grateful to them. Right. Let us start preparing for our next guest who will be with us shortly. Let me see if there's anything that I can read in the meantime. After our next guest, we're gonna drill down on the whole P. Diddy story and find out what on earth all that is about. Is there anything that I can cover before I bring on our next guest? Let me just see. Oh, yeah, no one should be charged for social media posts, by the way, unless they're breaking the law. But there is definitely one rule for rich middle class people and one rule for working class people, if this story is anything to go by. Bernie Spofforth, I've talked about her before. One of the first people to promote the fake name and fake details about the Southport murder. Well, while everyone else is getting banged up, she, from her £1 million plus abode in Chester, is not. No charge over spreading the false information and misinformation. She's a businesswoman. She's a clickbait idiot, frankly. Her tweets are designed for engagement farming. She appeared from nowhere during C19. And yes, she's been let off scot-free. And don't get me wrong, I think everybody should be in terms of that. I don't think anybody should be banged up for social media posts, right? Unless they are like seriously breaking the law, right? Unless they're seriously breaking the law. But a lot of the stuff that we've seen recently is not so serious that a caution wouldn't have sorted it. But I don't like the way that wealthy people are treated differently to working class people. And that is the reality. She comes over so beautifully middle class. She contributes to GB News, the Murdoch platforms, and the Murdoch platforms protected her so much that when the Times did an article about her, they named other people in the article, but they didn't name her. That's how middle class people involved with organizations like GB News and Murdoch get protected. But working class people out on the street, they're banged up. I don't like it. I come from a working class background and I don't like middle class bias. I don't like it. As I say, no one should be charged for those posts. But if one is, then it should be a rule for all, right? Let us bring in our next guest and change up the tempo somewhat. Let's do that. Let's change the tempo and make it much more positive before we then have to descend back again to looking into more filth. Sadly, but it must be done. It absolutely must be done. So let us do it. Let us do it. I am more equipped than most people to do it. And here's Danny. Good morning, Danny.
Good morning. How are you, Sonia?
Really good. Thank you, everybody. This is Danny Rossi. Danny, you do some really interesting work. So first of all, let us get some perspective on this, what you're doing, because this is one of those shows where sadly we're having to talk about a lot of the dark that is going on in this world, whether it's the Huw Edwards or the P. Diddy or the Mohammed Al-Fayed or whatever. But you have come here to spread some light and positivity because you work with people who have essentially been written off by society. Actually, the very kind of people that I was just talking about, the kind of people who are getting banged up for social media posts, right? That's the type of people that you work with, Danny. Tell us about what you're doing up there. Are you based in Blackpool?
We're based in Blackpool. However, we kind of work around Lancashire all the way up to Greater Manchester. We do work in Manchester. But yeah, we're working with young people that will potentially or realistically go in to be on NEETs, which is not an education, employment or training. These are young people that school maybe wasn't for them. They've got a lot of barriers around their life and learning. Broken homes. We have a lot of young people that are in the care system, and really, a failed education system has let them down. And we kind of take them, we work with them. These are young people that will be put into county lines, groomed into child sex exploitation, stealing cars. You know, they are very much groomed by criminality because it is waiting at the school gates for them, without a shadow of a doubt. So we work with them, we find out their interests, we deal with them differently as what a mainstream school would do. We bring the power of boxing in, martial arts. We work heavily on knife crime and making the right choices, really. And we're doing well with it. We are, but there's still a long way to go and a lot of barriers for us to break down.
Well, because what you're dealing with is decades of these young men. Is it primarily young men that you're dealing with?
It's primarily young men because we started as a construction-based course, but however, we do a lot of childcare now and beauty therapy. So, you know, without being stereotypical, we'd love to have more women within construction.
Got you.
However, you know, within Blackpool, we did have 12 young women on our course. 11 of them were victims of child sex exploitation.
So you are dealing with the result of decades of these people being failed, right? Of these young people being failed, being betrayed, being kicked to the curb, being written off, as we've seen what Keir Starmer thinks about people like this, right? He thinks they're the lowest of the low. I come from a similar background. My sister was in care. I understand these kind of things, right? Which is why I do what I do. But the question is, Danny, why do you do what you do? Because you have an empathy with these children. Why do you? Or these young people?
You know, I worked in a college environment, you know, for years, and I kept thinking to myself, this just isn't working. You know, they would cherry pick the people that they wanted on the course because they didn't want them to fail and affect their figures. You know, colleges, believe it or not, have a 42-day window where they openly, most of them that I've worked with, want them children that are difficult to leave. So it doesn't go against them figures. The issue we have with an overall thing around education and funding is people like ourselves and other providers that are on the actual shop floor on the streets don't have the funding. So them kids then become walking the streets. They're what we call unknown neets. And then that's where the criminality, you know, the radicalization, the drugs, the drug, all that comes into play. So there's a massive issue around funding that colleges get all of it, and the ones that are really making an impact, like ourselves and others, get nothing.
Outrageous. And you're called Roscon, right? And you sent me some information to do with what is actually happening on your streets in Blackpool. And I was aware that, I mean, there's a lot of poverty, obviously, that's taking place there. But some of this information was fairly shocking, right? So there's an increase in knife crime and weaponry, which is that's what happens what's happening all across the country. We know that. This is interesting. Home Office figures reveal there were 330 offences committed in Blackpool in 2022, 2023 involving a weapon, compared to just 64 in 2015, 2016, a rise of 416%. Is that directly attributable, do you think, to poverty, to lost hope? What's going on there?
I mean, where we're actually based in the third most deprived place in England to live, which is the Claremont ward. And I think it's years of seaside towns being forgotten, being left behind. You know, we are classed as a levelling up town from the Tories, whatever levelling up means. We've got nice big shiny buildings that are going up. However, we're not getting to the root of the problem, which is that communities now, you know, what is the word community? For me, it's kind of disappeared along the lines of, you know, we have a very transient town in Blackpool. You know, you might have a different next door neighbour every 3 months. You know, you can't build that rapport with the neighbour. We can't get that neighbourhood feeling. So there's a lot of issues. I mean, Blackpool, again, has the highest density of young people in care. You know, it's one of the cheapest places to live. And my argument has always been, you know, these guys work amazing jobs in residential care, looking after these young children. However, do councils understand where they're sending their children? Blackpool's a boiling pot.
Right.
You know, we have young people from all different parts of the country who have maybe been doing county lines, working in gangs. They come, they're on the streets, they find each other, you know. And that's why I think sometimes
they're the only family that they have, right? I mean, I get that. I mean, one example was Daryl, right? Daryl, I think, came from Moss Side. Is that right?
Yeah,
Shot 27 times, written off by the Home Secretary, said somebody like him would never be rehabilitated. But you proved them wrong, didn't you?
He proved them wrong. And like you say, he's been going now 11 years, 12 years into schools, colleges, wherever, youth clubs. And he mentors our young people. And they've really taken to him because he's relatable. You know, no disrespect, but Amanda Spielman from Ofsted with the glasses, no disrespect, on the end of her nose, talking to people like that we work with about how their day's been. They're not interested in speaking to that woman. She might be doing a good job. That's a different story. However, Daryl, who's lived it, been through it, been a target of grooming, been through child sex exploitation, that kind of thing, they're going to listen to him. And he's having an impact. We use a lot of different people. We've had I won't say his name, but he's one of the most decorated undercover police officers that he comes in, speaks to our young people. He tells them real life stories. They understand. And I think that's the problem. Your colleges, maybe mainstream schools, they don't get to that kind of impact because maybe it's bad press. They don't want to talk about it. They don't maybe want to listen to it. We listen. We get right down to it. We try and remove them barriers. And you know what? We've had some of the toughest young men in Blackpool who are involved in serious criminality. We've now got them apprenticeships. They've not been in trouble for 18 months.
We love that.
And that's why we do it. And you asked me before, why do we do it? And that's really the reason why. This is my hometown. And I don't want it to be the way it is at the minute. I want our young people to be successful. You can go out and earn £200-300 a day as a bricklayer, and that's really why myself and the staff do it.
So you offer training and apprenticeships, but here's the other thing that you don't mention, but I know it will be part of it. And that is because you're dealing with people who have been damaged and hurt by society and their backgrounds, and everything. They're going to come to you with a whole lot of emotional and psychological issues as well. How do you cope with that?
One of the things is meeting them at the door. Hello, how's your day been? How was your evening? We're the only people that, I've always said this in teaching and in coaching, you don't buy into the subject, you buy into the person delivering it. And if that person is stood at an inspirational person, we don't have to lay it on thick with them. It is a simple case of, did you go to the football this week? We break down barriers. Whereas, they go home, they might not have that love, they might not have that nurturing, they can't wait to come back to us. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've got some strong people around. We've got a boxer again in the town called Will Goldie Galloway. He was one of my students 15 years ago. He's now potentially going to be Blackpool's next world champion. He takes them for boxing. He tells them about, what he was like at school. So we have people that really relate to these kids. But it's not easy.
Positive.
Yeah, it's all positive, but it isn't easy. There's a lack of understanding, I think, around people, sat behind desks, with the word MP after their name or things like that, and think that they've got to this place where they've done their job. They're where they want it to be. Actually, that's where your job just starts.
Absolutely. You say your mantra is to absolutely leave no one behind. I love that. You say your passion is to ensure every young person, regardless of their previous education experiences or bad decision, is not held back. You're probably, for some of these people, you're probably the first adult that they encounter who has a belief in them.
Yeah, and I think, listen, it's not, it was my vision to set this up, but I wouldn't be able to do this without my staff.
Absolutely.
I have youth workers, so we kind of went away from a teaching environment, and I thought to myself, let's get youth workers in who are on the streets. We do a lot of detached work at night. We don't get any income for that. We do it because our kids are on the street. We want to protect them. But for me, I always walk past our kids, and I say, think about the decisions you're making, because that's what it is. And we allow them and support them, but they will make wrong decisions. They're children at the end of the day, but that shouldn't affect their whole life. And that's it, but the boxing element is a real impact. I know a lot of people are using that now, and there's still a lot of kind of negative thoughts around this. I had the police officer in about 18 months ago, and we had some young people, 12 years old, involved in criminality, and I said to him, they're your entrepreneurs of the future. And he was like, the criminals. And I went, no, they're not. They have got transferable skills.
Right.
Which now they could go on and be so successful if we can get them at an early age. The boxing, we're teaching resilience, discipline. Well, some people think, well, no, you're just teaching them to fight. We aren't. In boxing generally, it gives you that confidence to not be bullied, but it also stops the bully from bullying, because they realizes that they're in an environment So yeah, we're trying our best. We have got a lot of issues here. I think we are a town with city problems. However, there are some really good people here trying to do good things. We just need more funding from central
Right.
government.
Now this is, I'm reading some of the comments here. So Cheryl says, or Cherry Cupcake rather, says, OMG, this guy is inspiring. How can we help? Donations? Question mark, question mark. What do you know donations? What's the
Yeah, I
situation?
mean, we've actually just not purchase, but obviously we have to lease our units in a really deprived area. So we do put donations out for like AstroTurf and things like that because we want to build a basketball court for them to do stuff. We're also turning all our units into a youth club at night. So little things like what we do ask for is pool tables, badminton rackets, anything like that helps really.
Can you send me a link where people can donate so I can put that in our description? Because people are really, it's like it's so important that we have some positivity in this world because everything is such doom and gloom. And so when lovely Aaron, had said to me, there's this guy, he's doing this, and I was like, yeah, that sounds absolutely great because we need more of this. Literally, there's such a downer on working class kids, and it's just all so wrong. And yeah, good to hear something positive, says Stephen. Absolutely, it's absolutely vital, but I don't think for one second that it's an easy job. I know it's not, and we're not. None of us are pretending that these young people are saints either.
No.
They will have seen certain things. They will have certain mindsets and attitudes. But as I say, Danny, I come from a very similar background, and well, look at me now. I'm interviewing you about. Do you know what I mean? We can all rise up, can't we? We can all rise up. That's the point, and I think that's really important. But Danny, I think what you're doing is really, really inspiring. What would you like everybody to know about your position, where you're coming from, and what you're seeing?
Obviously it's not just about us. Like I've said to you, there's some really good training providers, and it's independent training providers that people have set up the business. No, and I'm being totally honest here. There's no big income in this. It's a business that is built on morals and trying to do the right thing. And from our point of view, young people from my experience want to do well in life. A lot of them haven't had the nurturing, the family to have them skills to do that. And all we're trying to do is levitate them to the right place, levitate them to the right skills, and then engage employers to give them a chance, because employers have got to step up. We can't keep saying there's a skill shortage in this country, but at the same time not want to give young people a chance. I've got 60 young people here now. Yeah. 12 of them are going to be looking for a job at the end of year 11. I need employers to come and say, you know what? I'm going to give that young person a shot in life, because we know when you're earning money and you're employed and you may be leaving a circle that you were with, because I'm a big believer in show me your friends, I'll show you your future. However, we need them to break the cycle and get into employment. And I'm the same. I'm from a family of Scousers, and my dad come out of the Toxteth riots and things like that. So it can be done, but we need all people on board to help us. That's it.
Absolutely. We will definitely put a link in our description for you. Let me read you some of these comments. Absolutely wonderful. What a great guy Danny is. Good luck in all you do for all the young people, says Maria. And Humphrey says you're walking the walk. And that is the bottom line, is you're actually doing it. You're not just talking about it or pontificating about it like members of parliament do. You are out there doing it, which is absolutely great. We love it. B says, what a beautiful man and human Danny truly is. Indeed.
Oh, thank you.
It's wonderful. And Soul Sound said, helping underprivileged children is really not easy. The anger, the fear, the pain, the low self-esteem, the lack of family support. Bravo, Danny. And so say all of us.
Oh, appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
He's a warrior. Yes, he is. We love him. We love him. Everybody, this is Danny Rossi.
Yeah.
Great to have you with us, Danny. Have a terrific day. Take good care of yourself.
And you, Sonia. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to let me come on.
Not at all. Anytime. Keep us up to speed with what you're up to, Danny. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
God bless you. Bye. Bye. How lovely. See, we can do positivity around here, can't we? Yes, we can. Because it's important, right? It's important to do that. So, right, where are we? Let me just move this screen over a little bit. Was in their own kids. Why do people who were abused in boarding school go on to send their own kids to boarding school? Mick, it's an eternal question. That's a good point. It's a great point. Why? I have no idea, mate. I have no idea. But it seems very wrong to me indeed. I'd ban boarding schools if it was down to me. I would. I think it's child abuse. But I'm also aware that a lot of people work night and day to be able to send their children to boarding school because they've been raised to believe that that will give them what they need. Good bloke. Well done, Danny, says Claire. Good bloke, all that fluff and stuff. Will you be covering the UN summit of the future? Yes, Greg. Absolutely. In answer to your question. Right, let's talk about Puff Daddy. Because, well, we have to. Because there's just so much to cover here. I mean, a lot. There is a lot. So, we're dealing with 15 to 20 years of blackmail on tape that the man probably has, at least. Volumes of baby oil on an industrial scale. Puff Daddy, of course, music mogul, music executive, CEO of Bad Boy Records, the producer who brought the Notorious Big to fame, and many other people, including Faith Evans. Puffy's biggest hit was obviously based on Sting's song, Every Breath You Take, and it was I'll Be Missing You, and it was after the death of the Notorious Big in 1997, May 1997. I've interviewed Puffy a couple of times, once at his apartment in New York. I've discussed this before, so I'm not going to go into any great detail, but I just thought it was odd because I arrived at the Bad Boy offices in Manhattan. I think it was the Meatpackers district. And I arrived at his office to interview him and he wasn't there. He was at his apartment and they said, oh, he said you can go in and kind of look around his office and get a feel for it to kind of give you detail for your article. I thought this is really interesting. And I believe they were filming me because they literally left me alone in his office. And I noted things like there was an image of pictures on the side of him with his parents, and lots of very proactive signs all around the Bad Boy office, things like, if you sleep, you'll fail, and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I want to pick up that point that I've just seen. Yeah, James, I agree with you. The name Puff Daddy sounds like a creepy groomer name when you think about it. Yeah, why do you think he changed it to Diddy? So this is what he told me about his name, literally from his mouth. I said, why are you called Puff Daddy? And he said, when I was at school and I used to play like football and sports, when I get angry, I puff up my chest and they call me Puff Daddy. Well, with hindsight, I now think that he was a very angry, narcissistic control freak who lost a lot of time. And I think the daddy itself is very grooming. I'm not saying that right. James, I agree with you. So let's look at this, right? So he was arrested on Monday in a sex trafficking case. He's charged with racketeering, sex trafficking and prostitution offences. And he is accused of forcing women into freak-off orgies and presiding over a criminal empire of sexual crimes. He was arrested at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York City. He's since been charged, all of which he pleaded not guilty to in a Manhattan court. And he managed to pull together a $50 million bond for bail, and he was refused. How bad are these charges that the courts refused him a $50 million bond? That's extraordinary. So what we're hearing, some of the details are just actually quite shocking. This apparently has been going on for over a decade. And I think with Mohammed Al-Fayed, probably much longer, actually. And bear in mind, these are all just allegations at the moment. These are all just allegations, although there appears to be an awful lot of tangible evidence to support it. So, as I say, the charges are tied to these freak-off parties, coerced sex acts that Combs allegedly orchestrated and recorded, according to the indictment, the 14-page indictment, which I've read, which is gobsmacking. And who does that remind you of, right? Mossad recorded people in these situations. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, right? MI5 and MI6 do it as well to use as blackmail, especially when it involves children. The thing is what Puff is involved oftentimes was men on men. Now, that shouldn't be a problem. That's not illegal, right? It's not illegal to be same-sex attracted. But Puffy comes from a world where it was a distinct no-no to be gay, right? In hip hop, a distinct no-no. So I think that's probably contributed to it to a degree. But We also saw that video, didn't we, where Puffy was beating up his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. And you saw I mean, I'm sure people saw the rage in a hotel where he was kicking her, dragging her by her hair. And now we discover that was after a freak off and she was trying to escape. And she was with him for a very long period of time. So let's go into this. So these recordings have been described as sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating. And they were no doubt being used as collateral to ensure like the obedience and silence of the people involved. He is said to have exerted control over victims by promising career opportunities, providing and threatening to withhold financial support, dictating how they looked, monitoring their health records. Where have we heard that before? These predators monitor people's health records to check that they're clean to be raped or whatever, right? And Puffy was also said to be controlling where they lived, according to the indictment. As I say, the bail was denied. He's a control freak. The idea of him being locked up will kill him. He begged for bail, proposing his own home and his mother's as part of a $50 million bond. It was denied, as I say. So how bad are these charges that they denied such a huge one? Oftentimes, bail is usually set for big clients like this, or big clients, for big names like this. Bail is often set in America around the $20 million mark. He doubled that and more and was still refused it. And amongst some of the revelations to come out, shocking, more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube were seized from his homes. He was also accused of making women have sex with male prostitutes until they were so worn out they required IV drips. And what's interesting is arguably none of this criminal case would have happened if the civil cases hadn't happened first. Remember, he's being sued from all over by all manner of people, including Cassie, which is who he settled with recently. And these civil cases led to criminal cases. This is a good way to do it if you're unable to get the police involved. As I say, over the past year, he's been sued by people who say he subjected them to physical or sexual abuse. He has denied many of those allegations. And his lawyer, Mark Agnifilio, called the new indictment an unjust prosecution. As I say, it was the civil charges that made the difference. The evidence gathered in litigation against people who were suing Diddy piled up, and much of that information has led to the criminal investigation and the charges. Bravery led to this potential expose of a powerful music industry executive and those involved. And those involved are where it's probably getting very troubling right now for Hollywood and the music industry, because it took the most vulnerable, those who had been beaten, those who had been silenced, those who had been threatened, to stand up and say no more. Abused individuals saying, I'm not going to let this monster get away with it anymore. And while it must always be innocent until proven guilty, we all know he beats women because we've seen it now. So he is absolutely a piece of, right? The Cassie Ventura one is a perfect example. Many of the depraved allegations against Diddy first came to light almost a year ago when Cassie sued him for rape, physical abuse, and mental abuse. She alleged that he coerced her into sex acts with multiple male prostitutes. And she also said she herself was tasked with finding the prostitutes online. And this is quite common as well. We heard that Combs would then watch the encounters, film them, and masturbate, according to the lawsuit. The free costs were detailed in Cassie's November lawsuit, which delved into her decade-long nightmare she allegedly endured in the relationship. And some people say, why didn't she leave? Well, this is always very hard. It really is. And the problem is when you get that beaten down, it's like you don't know your own mind. You're like in such a fog and such a haze. And she would have been told, repeatedly, if you do this, we're going to kill you. We're going to come after you. Right. So the level of fear around these people, because people are like, why would you stay with an abuser? Well, we saw her trying to escape. He ran down the corridor and he dragged her by her hair back to the room. He beat her. He kicked her in the head because he's a monster. He's a monster. And that was after a freak off in an LA hotel in March 2016. And you know what they did, right? They hid the footage. The hotel hid the footage. The suit claimed that Combs paid the hotel $50,000 to obtain that security footage of the event. And he and Cassie Ventura settled the lawsuit in just a day after she'd released it. We have decided to resolve this matter amicably. Combs said at the time. I wish Cassie and her family all the best. And sources at the time said that he had to pay Cassie $30 million. So that indictment, right? And see you later, Marie. Take care of yourself. Yeah, Mick, I know what made her keep going back. Well, you can see she had difficulty escaping. He was like dragging her back, and he had his thugs around her. Now, Rosa mentions Clive Davis, big boss at Barrister. For a very, very long time, he oversaw Whitney Houston's career. Clive Davis was, in my opinion, the sociopath who still had his Grammy party on the day that Whitney Houston was said to have been found dead. She was obviously found dead, but I still doubt the circumstances, in her bath. And he held his Grammy party below her dead body. The ambulance did not remove Whitney Houston for 11 hours. I always felt that sounded very sacrificial, personally. But Puffy was involved with Clive Davis. Absolutely, Rosa. And so, yes, I saw that, Robert. I saw that. So let's talk about this indictment, right? So disturbing details of these kind of marathon sex parties were exposed in the 3-count indictment, including that Combs would fly sex workers from around the world for what would often be these kind of drug-fueled day-long orgies that required IV drips after it and thousands of bottles of baby oil. The document said after free-coughs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Prosecutors said that employees for Puffy booked hotel rooms for the free-coughs while stocking them with baby oil, lubricant and extra bed sheets. According to the indictment, Combs took violent measures to keep his free-coughs out of the public eye. He would hit, kick and drag women by their hair during the parties and left some of them so injured that he would have to keep them in hiding for days while they recovered. This is what prosecutors are saying. As I say, he taped those free-coughs, right? That was for leverage. Who knows who Puffy was working with, allegedly, right? Because Epstein was working with Mossad. Was Puffy working with Mossad? You know, those tapes are highly likely not just for him to have leverage over those people. So as well as facing time in prison, he could also be looking at a very serious financial hit, because it is possible that, well, we've already heard that the government intends to seize any and all property, real and personal, and unspecified sums of money from the alleged crimes, because you can't have proceeds from crime, right? And according to the indictment, the racketeering charges cover crimes that go back as far as 2008. And the claims of sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution start with acts committed first in 2009. And as I say, the indictment is absolutely damning. And all of the various revelations. Agents also uncovered 3 AR-15 rifles with defaced serial numbers in Puffy's Miami bedroom closet. The weapons had been broken down into parts along with magazines with ammunition loaded in them. And that came after Combs was involved in the gunpoint kidnapping of someone in 2011. Combs was on Tuesday. I mean, it goes on. Like, his history is really bad. He was involved in not only that kind of shooting at a nightclub, that when he was going out with Jennifer Lopez, and bear in mind, there's a lot of people here who have been involved with Puffy. Jennifer Lopez, Justin Bieber, Barack Obama, all of these people, right? I'm not saying that they are responsible for anything. I'm just saying he's got a lot of friends, So he's got a horrible history. He was involved in promoting a gig in Harlem in 2011 where it was like Heavy D and Jodeci, because he started off at I think it was MCA, Uptown MCA, the record label, and he organised and promoted that gig. And I think at least 2 people died. And he's just got a history of like violent things happen. Violent things just kind of follow this man, right? But he always portrayed himself as this kind of social justice warrior, because they do, don't they? And I was looking at some images of these freak-off parties, and it's really weird. Like on one of them, there's a giant bed. And when I say a giant bed, it's like the size of a lorry, like the length of a lorry. But in it, the camera goes close to this bed, and tucked in it is a little doll, a doll is tucked in this bed that is part of the freak-off parties. Really weird stuff. Really weird stuff. There's lots to come out. We know for a fact there's also another video that I was watching where he was actually collecting phones before the party, and some of the girls that he was collecting the phones from who were involved in these freak-offs, some of them looked like 14 or 15 years old. And but his hidden tapes could literally change things, right? Because who are on those tapes? Who are on those tapes? We know that Puffy used to hold these things called flavor parties, quite similar to what Nickelodeon used to hold. Nickelodeon, the children's channel, and there were a whole load of predators and perverts around Nickelodeon in those days, including Dan. Can't remember his surname. I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments. Dan Schneider, absolute perv. And that Nickelodeon used to run these parties where young children would go to them at the weekends. The problem is fame. Fame is, I mean, obviously the problem is predators and perverts, but the problem that leaves these children vulnerable is fame, either their parents' desire for their children to be famous or the children's desire to be famous. So these flavor parties that he used to do, right? And he had people like a very young Usher there and Justin Bieber. And some imagery of Puffy being an adult and Justin Bieber as this small kid, and Puffy is saying, yeah, we're 48 hours, we're gonna go and enjoy ourselves and everything. And now when you look at what he's being accused of, you have to wonder. There was a reason he called his company Bad Boy. Of that, I'm absolutely certain. And now we're hearing that Kim Porter, the mother of his twins who died mysteriously, actually said to be pneumonia, but many people just did not believe that. But there's a book that was published on September the 6th, just days before he was indicted for racketeering and sex trafficking. And it's a 60-page book titled Kim's Lost Words. It claims to be a collection of the diaries of Kim Porter, Diddy's late ex, the mother of 3 of his children. She died of pneumonia in 2018, so we were said. And this collection diary entry was said to have been leaked by her friends. It describes Puffy's, shall we say, colourful love life from the 1990s through Porter's final year, including alleged philandering with both male and female top musicians and rappers, and these debauched orgies that he had at his home in which Porter took part. And the book also talks, this is interesting, right? So it talks about very famous people that were involved in these orgies and in these parties. And in it, the book recounts discovering and making copies of tapes of Diddy, that Diddy had made himself having sex with young boys that he was managing. Right, including an alleged tape involving an 18-year-old pop star who went on to become a household name. I wonder who that could be. And the final entry of that memoir, which, as I say, was said to have been written by Kim Porter and leaked out. It's almost like she's talking to us from the grave if it's hers. But the final entry of that memoir has Porter falling fatefully ill, dramatically texting her friends saying, he got me, and then calling 911, and then that's it. And then her friends were said to have got together that book and published it. Small book, diary entries. It's been published by a Los Angeles-based publisher who claims that he was given this by her close friends. He said this is Chris Todd, the editor, he lightly edited it into a book under the pseudonym Jamal T. Millwood. Todd has not, we should say, not offered any documentary evidence to prove its authenticity, but it is available on Amazon and has not been removed. And he said, I was lucky enough to meet someone that purported to have Kim Porter's flash drive. So that's interesting, very interesting. So what else is there to tell you? Well, if he goes down, he's taking his Hollywood accomplices down with him. So, as I say, got lots of very, very famous friends, whether that is Taylor Swift or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama and Michelle Obama or Usher or Justin Bieber. And I think it's fair to say that Justin Bieber comes over, for me, as somebody who has potentially been abused. I get that. And the other thing that was interesting was all these people from Fortune 500 companies suddenly resigning this week. Very interesting. One who was kind of highlighted and people wondered whether he'd been at the Freakoffs was Kevin Liles, a music executive. Worth about $60 million. He exited this week as CEO of 300 Entertainment. And many people are convinced that there is a link between Kevin Liles stepping down and Puffy's charges. TMZ had spoken to Kevin Liles back in April, and he said he never knew that Diddy, had those kind of parties. Never knew that. That's it. He said he never knew the Diddy who had been plastered all over the mainstream media. Interesting. And Kevin Liles stuck by Diddy completely. And Liles' transition from his company will happen at the end of the month. Sources close to the situation tell us his exit could be directly tied to a massive shakeup happening at Warner as opposed to anything to do with Puffy. But who knows? Who knows? There are loads of other people who have stepped down as well. And I'm not suggesting that they are necessarily involved, but I just think it's interesting. These are a lot of various music and entertainment industry executives. Eric Pryor, president of Fine Arts. Jonathan Holloway, Rutgers president. Then you have people like Kathy Newsham, Bay City mayor, also stepping down. So like I say, I'm not tying them up with Puffy, but a whole swathe of people stepping down this week. And you have to wonder why. I just think it's interesting. Where are we? We'll look after stream. Don't post it in the chat. What's that? Unforeseen, absolutely. It's completely strange. And I couldn't believe it when I read about it. I don't know what you're talking about. People should look at the video of James Corden sniffing Bieber. Tell me that's normal. John from Coventry. It's not normal. Can I just say, I used to do this kind of series on Rise, another breakfast show that I had developed, and it was called The Dark Side of, and I did The Dark Side of Puffy 2 years ago, and I also did The Dark Side of James Corden, I think 2 years ago. I think both of them, there are clips on YouTube. So we shall see what's going on, but this is one that's going to run and run. It's been going on for a very, very long time. God bless Justin Bieber and all the other children they abused, said Randy. Randy is fairly certain Justin Bieber has been abused, and I hear that. I hear that. But you can see people why today's show had to be the way it had to be, right? It had to be the way it had to be. Dilip wants to know if Epstein, Eggstein attend with hidden cameras. I mean, the thing is, right, is that Sean Combs, I'm going to call him his full name, right? Because Diddy makes him sound like some kind of comedy character. And then he went on and he wanted to be called Love and Everything. But I really think we should either just call him Psycho Sociopath or Sean Combs, really. Kenneth says, save our children, indeed. And the problem, again, I say, you know, a lot of the time, our parents taking their foot off the pedal and allowing young people to be involved. As I say, I saw these young girls who were giving their mobile phones to Puffy before his freak-offs. I didn't see that firsthand. I saw a video of it. And they were young. We're talking 14, 15, right? My daughter could not have been anywhere at 14 or 15 that I didn't know about. So parents are also had to take some responsibility for leaving their children vulnerable. But also we have things like internet influencers who sell this bogus lifestyle that make young people think that being famous is the be all and end all of everything. I really think that a lot of influencers should come with a public health warning because they just lie. They lie constantly and they're paid to lie. Drumstick said, P. Diddy sounds a bit pedo. I understand. I hear what you're saying. So we're going to move on to something different. We're going to move on to something different because I think it's important too as well, because it's also horrific. And that is what the hell has been happening with exploding, you know, pages this week, right? I mean, it's just more than, to our knowledge, at least 32 people were killed, 2,450 people injured after thousands of walkie-talkies and pagers exploded in Lebanon. And multiple sources say this is Israel's Mossad spy agency targeting Hezbollah members. Israel has not yet commented on the blasts. But here's the thing, is that if it's highly likely it's Israel. Come on, we know it. The logo on these exploding pages is Icon, right? They say they stopped producing them 10 years ago. But here's the thing, if Israel can actually have that precision, why haven't they done it before with Hamas? Or do they just get great joy and pleasure out of murdering innocent people? But the point is that innocent people are being murdered. And I saw the reprehensible Julia Hartley spewer on talk radio saying, in response to the fact that innocent children were murdered by these exploding pages, she was like, well, you're going to have collateral damage. That's what these psychopaths think about innocent dead children, right? So let's kind of look into this, really, because there was a second wave of blasts on Wednesday as radios and other devices were detonated across Lebanon. Additional explosions were reported throughout the capital of Beirut and in the country's south following Tuesday's massive security breach. So we are talking thousands injured. Hartley Brewer is despicable, Peter. Yes, she is. She's absolutely despicable. Horrible. Now, Stephanie, it does make you think about all of our devices. When I heard this story, I was like, so this is what they can do. We know this, kind of like direct energy weaponry, for example. But it does make you think about other devices and what can be done. I think it's terrifying. Shug, exactly. Now we know what they can do with electronic devices. We already knew, but there is confirmation now exactly that. And that's what I think is also really important about this story, right? I mean, I do think it's really important that innocent victims are murdered. I think that's really important. I don't consider that we can just write them off as collateral damage. But the other story is this is what can be done with technology. And I think it's really important to highlight it. Okay. This is war territory, isn't it? This is literally war territory that we're entering into. The thing is it's really important to be mindful of who's supporting what. I see this week that Pink came out as a Zionist, by the way, and Ed Sheeran brought joy, according to the Jerusalem Post this week. Ed Sheeran brought joy to wounded IDF soldiers. Well, whoopee woo. I'd already gone off Pink anyway from when she was promoting the jab, right? And I used to like her. I really thought that she was somebody who was like a bit different, but the truth is just a puppet, isn't she? So you've got to be really careful who you support. But very troubling about the whole idea of exploding pages. And what next? The thing is, this is not going away. This is not going away. There's no way that Hezbollah are not going to come back about this. No way at all. Mick said, how easy would it be for Apple to send an update to stop protection against battery overcharging? Have you seen one blow? Yeah, I know. Frightening, isn't it? It's absolutely frightening. And can I just say, while we're on that subject about weaponry as one example, I must come to this. And that is this week, I released a video, a long form video, which is not available on YouTube, but it's available on Rumble and it's available on X. And I will put a link in the description. I talked with former IT expert Ian Jarvis. He's latterly a body therapist and soft tissue expert. And I also, with Ian, was former Unilever executive and present day counsellor Nicholas Martin. And they talked to me about 5G. Next generation technology and why we are entering a dangerous new world with it. And they went into such substantial detail with evidence. You can hear in the interview, I'm asking them for documents to back up what they're saying. And they supplied everything. And the point is that it really made me think about 5G, especially with these exploding pages. And that is, we have to be incredibly careful. I know that there are expressions that people are aware of, electrosmog, for example, right? But this video, and I can't say much about it on YouTube, but this video goes into great detail for nearly an hour and a half about the problems with 5G and why we must push back against it. But the Hezbollah exploding pages story, I think, plays right into the hands of what is going on with 5G. Bear in mind that 5G comes from military. It was used on battlefields, right? And so scary stuff. And it's even more scary that I can say so very little about it on this live stream. What's that? C4 needs a electric current to explode. What's that about? I went to Spain for a week years ago, got home, and B's iPad exploded. B's had a cheap tablet, which apparently exploded. That's not good, is it? That's not good at all. So yeah, not impressed with exploding pages, and not impressed with people who say, oh, it's so brilliant, it's so clever, it's genius targeting and everything. You're psychopaths. You are psychopaths. Innocent people are being murdered there. Right, breathe. Take a glug of water. Soul Sound said, hope you hit the like button, and that goes for everybody. She's proper bossy. We love her. Yes, Shug. Barry Trower was telling people many years before it was even common knowledge. Yes, absolutely. Did I tell you what happened to me the other week? Kath turned off we turned our 5G off on the router. Did I tell you what happened the other week when I was coming on here? And I actually said, good morning to you all. I hope you're alive and kicking. And out of nowhere, a tab sprung up, right? And I don't have any Siri or anything like that switched on, but out of nowhere, a tab sprung up on my computer of alive and kicking from Simple Minds. After I said to you, good morning, hope you're all alive and kicking, it sprung up the video for it. I mean, obviously it's all around us. We know that it's all around us, but really scary stuff. Really scary stuff. So I urge you, please, to watch that 5G film and share it far and wide, because the two men are absolutely brilliant and fearless. Way, Tanya is sharing some good news. We could do with some good news. Dear Sonia, I will share some personal good news with you. My husband and I are celebrating the 10th anniversary of our happy marriage today. I love you guys. Cheers. Happy anniversary, Tanya and hubby. We love that. I love that. I'm a romantic at heart, Tanya. That's absolutely wonderful. Wonderful. We love to hear that. Yes. Congratulations, Tanya. And so say all of us. Yes, Milana. Yeah. Alive and Kicking is still a great tune, isn't it, by the way? It so is. I still love it. And good morning to Lucy. Grand risings to you, Lucy. Lucy wrote to me, said, Dear Sonia, I follow your work. I feel moved to contact you regarding the death of Dr. Michael Mosley. I have a feeling that his death was suspicious. Love, Lucy. Now, Lucy, here's the thing, is when deaths happen that appear accidental, there's always room for there being a suspicion attached to it, right? I've not been able to find anything that makes it particularly suspicious. For those who need their minds refreshing about this, Dr. Michael Mosley was a British television and radio journalist. He was a producer and a presenter. He worked for the BBC from 1985 until his death. He presented television programs on biology and medicine. He was pretty much every kind of doctor that I deplore. Although he did say some good and interesting things about nutrition, but he was absolutely a big promoter of the whole C19 narrative. And he was an advocate of intermittent fasting, low carbohydrate diets. He died on the Greek island of Symi on the 5th of June, 2024. He was said to have fallen. And I take your point, Lucy. It was odd, right? And then shortly after that, we had the Jay Rayner story as well. So it is interesting. MB says, get the Wi-Fi out, use wires, old school. I've got an Ethernet plugged into the back of this, by the way, and which is kind of like the same thing. And I'm becoming really draconian in our house now about Wi-Fi. I've made it very clear we switch off Wi-Fi at night, right? We were leaving it on. It's going off at night. That interview changed me. But Lucy, just go back to Dr. Michael Mosley. I take your point, Lucy. And if anything crosses my path, I will raise it up for you. I think anybody who works for the BBC, if they die in questionable circumstances, there should always be a question mark over it moving forward. Greg said, people like that doctor don't rise to place of influence within the media. They're always placed there by those with the vested interest. Hey, it's Kath's dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dave, who is listening today. Happy birthday, Dave. Everybody join me in saying happy birthday, Dave. And have a beautiful birthday, Dave. Really hope you do. So just like to say thank you for all your wonderful chemtrail pictures. Thank you to Peter and Yvonne and June and David and James and more. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. As you can see, I'm back to the old system. Yesterday, had somebody working on this. It was all fitted, all sorted. Everything was fine. Everything was synced up. I checked it this morning, back at sync. I said, sod that, going back to the old system until we can absolutely, completely rectify it. Rock Lever, yeah, Rock Lever. I was never convinced about where Michael Mosley was found either, because I just felt that given where he fell and then he was found days later, I felt that there would be wild animals, including seagulls, what you're talking about, that would have been around that scene. And it was really weird as also, Lucy, where he was actually found. He was like found, wasn't he, really near that kind of beach bar and restaurant. And he was found when a press conference was taking place, which was also odd. Honestly, it's also odd, right? I think it was the local mayor, wasn't it? It was like, what's that over there? Oh, it's Michael Mosley's body. Weird. So, Lucy, I take your point. None of it appears straightforward. None of it appears straightforward. And also, talking about none of it appearing straightforward. Oh, what's this? Oh, yes. Oh, God, I've left the name off. But one of you lovely viewers sent me an email about Mike Lynch. Mike Lynch, if you remember, he was a tech entrepreneur who died in the Bayesian yacht, in which very sadly he died, his daughter Hannah died, Jonathan Bloomer, chairman of Morgan Stanley Bank, died, Judy Bloomer, Jonathan's wife, Chris Morvillo from British international law firm, Clifford Chance, they all died of suffocation when the yacht went down. And as my viewer, please forgive me, I haven't copied over your name from the email. Very naughty. As my viewer points out, the Saturday prior to that sinking, of course, Mike Lynch, CEO, was hit by a car whilst out jogging and died in hospital. And as the email goes on, this all happened after a 10-year legal battle with Hewlett Packard, whose top three shareholders are Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. Amongst Mike Lynch's customers were MI5, NASA, and the Israeli Secret Service. The Italian divers are due to go back down to the yacht, which is sitting on the bed, to retrieve 2 encrypted hard drives belonging to Mike and his daughter Hannah. Remember the involvement of Italy with the USA elections. There are a lot on anomalies. You're absolutely right, there are. And forgive me for not copying your name over to this email. But again, it's another story, isn't it? It's another story that just does not add up. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you know what? It probably isn't sense. That's it. Yes, they monopolized everything by the back door. Robert thinks that was another setup. Very strange. I believe that something is odd there. I take Lucy's point completely. And can I please remind you, next Sunday, 29th of September, at Chapel Arts in Bath, England, that is, fairly close to Bristol, but it's a separate place to Bristol. From 5 p.m. will be the first UK screening of Andy Wakefield's Protocol 7, plus a Q&A with Andy. Andy will be remote in Texas, but I will be hosting the Q&A between the audience and Andy. And I'm absolutely looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing Protocol 7. I'm looking forward to talking to Andy. I'm looking forward to facilitating questions between the audience and Andy. So if you're able to be there, please do. And I can meet you. Yes, Cavan, it is very hard to trust anyone anymore. Yeah, it is. I agree with you. Yes, Ian says, imagine getting run over while jogging. He was clipped. I hear you. Stephen, yeah, like the Maxwell death all those years ago. What, Robert Maxwell, who stole the pensions, didn't he, from his employers and then mysteriously toppled off the boat, right? But also, remember that also happened to Natalie Wood as well. Natalie Wood was obviously a very famous Hollywood actress, and she mysteriously toppled off the boat as well, right? Yes, it is great. Bath is beautiful, says Kat. Bath is beautiful, isn't it? What else? People, we are coming close to the end of our show today. Oh, yes, we are. What else? Great news. Let's see. Let me catch up with you. Oh, been a busy day, hasn't it? Been an absolute busy day. How many people have been watching us? Shall we have a look? Let's have a look. Yes. 2,183 have logged into the live stream this morning, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate your gifts, your coffees, any donations. I appreciate you all, frankly. I appreciate the letters, the emails, the pictures, the images. I appreciate all the live chat. I appreciate our beautiful and wonderful guests. Wonderful Joanna. She was crying, absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. And brilliant work also that Danny is doing as well with vulnerable teenagers. So all of that is really good. It's dangerous being famous, says Sasha. Life insurance is sky high. Thank you, Anne. Thumbs up. My brother lives in that part of the UK in Wiltshire, says Stephen. I know it well. I come from Cirencester, which is very near to all of there. So I'm going to end on an email from one of our glorious viewers, Andy. He wrote in, he said, this is funny. Dear Auntie Sonia, please share some of your everyday wisdom with me. I feel stuck in a rut. My last serious relationship ended a year ago. I'm not interested in anyone. I don't want to go back to my ex, but I still think about her, sometimes over and over. It's insane. Any tips for moving on? Yes, Andy. So thank you. I always wanted to be an agony aunt, so thank you for crowning me that today. Can I say I am the queen of moving on? Right. But then I'm also someone who's had to learn to overcome my more sentimental side, where I've spent time, maybe even years at some stages, dwelling over what might have been. And actually, a typical example of moving on was the whole situation with TNT. I didn't want to leave TNT. TNT, by the way, last day today, The Guardian approached me about getting involved in a hit piece. And while I don't like TNT, I'm not getting involved in a hit piece with The Guardian. You've got to be kidding me. I just sent them the video where I talked about TNT. But that is a perfect example. TNT incentivized me greatly by paying me a fabulous, fabulous salary to present their morning show, but they also censored me and I couldn't do that. And so I had to make the decision that I had to move on. And it was hard. When I handed in my notice, it was hard, but I did it. And then, you know, I started this and I jumped, I leapt, and you caught me, as I've said before. And we are now on episode 34 of Wake Up with Sonia Poulton and guests, and we are growing. We are absolutely growing. So, Andy, I understand absolutely about moving on, whether that is from a situation like a job that you didn't necessarily want to leave, but you were forced to, like a relationship that you know has run its time, and but it's still hard. Emotionally, just because we decide that something has to end, it doesn't mean that our emotions immediately catch up with that in that moment, right? So, Andy, I completely get it. So let me talk to you about this, because as I say, I am somebody who's had to learn how to overcome the more sentimental side of myself. And I have at times in my life, you know, kind of dwelled on what might have been. And I don't do that anymore, because what I learned was if something ended, it wasn't meant to be. I had to learn that there were no, for example, no right partners, but wrong times. That's baloney. If it was the right partner, it would be the right time. And that's how I learned to move on. Logic and a healthy dose of cynicism, Andy, by the way, about kind of a romanticized notion of what romance is. I'm still a romantic, but I'm a realistic one, if that's not an oxymoron. I digress. Andy, this week is the perfect time for moving on. Thank you, Marlena. That's very, very kind and generous of you. I appreciate that. But yeah, this week is absolutely the perfect time to move on. You want to know why? Because we've had a harvest super full moon this week. I think it was about Tuesday, wasn't it? And coming up this weekend, we've got the autumn equinox on the 22nd, 23rd, depending where you are. And that it literally is providing the perfect environment and atmosphere to let go of what no longer serves us. So just so we all know what an equinox is, by the way, it occurs twice a year during the transition from winter to summer and again from summer to winter. It's the moment when the earth isn't tilted either towards or away from the sun. This is the autumn equinox for us and the fall equinox for many others, including in the States. And it's when the sun crosses the celestial equator from north to south. And this occurs around September 22nd or September 23rd each year in the northern hemisphere. And on this day, day and night are approximately equal in length, signaling the official start of autumn for us over here. Hence why it's known as autumn equinox. But what makes it so incredible for it being the right atmosphere for letting go and moving on is it's aligning with an intense eclipse season. So, which already denotes fated developments, the things that are meant to be. And it brings a lot of kind of emotionally in charge kind of atmospheres. I don't know if any of you have been feeling kind of like a bit on edge, a bit prickly or whatever, because I have. Yesterday when I was prepping the show, I was a bit like a cat on a hot tin roof, but a lot of that is to do with the planetary alignments, because I know they're very real. I know they're very real, and that would explain, and and observably so, because many women, for example, their menstrual cycle syncs up with a full moon. The full moon is so powerful. It's so powerful. It dictates the tides, right? It's so powerful. It dictates our menstrual cycle. So we know that that is observably so. That's scientific. That is not astrological woo woo, right? That's scientific. So anyway, what's happening is this incredible autumn fall equinox is aligning with this intense eclipse season. You're going to like this, Andy. And it starts the Libra season. Libra is great, the sign of the scales, balance, justice. And it's a time to make serious decisions and reflect deeply on what truly matters and what you want to take with you into the next chapter of your life. So, about moving on and how to wake yourself up to the present. I heard this brilliant quote. I don't know who made the quote. I don't have a source for it. You might. And that is, if you're not going to talk about it in the last hour of your life, don't make it a priority in your lifetime. What a sobering thought. I immediately am forced to prioritize what is important in my life. Who and what is important in your life? And Andy, your ex isn't, as you know, but it's kind of like, it's like the ripple effect, isn't it? Even a year after, you can still like, oh, what if only blah, blah, blah. We all go through it. I did. And people have different ways of detaching themselves from the past and moving on. And, sometimes there are issues with ourselves why we can't let go. Like, for example, sentimentality and insecurity make us hold on to things, old things that we need to let go of, whether that's physically, psychologically, or emotionally. Because the fact is, we cannot come into our true power. And this spot at the end of each show is always about bringing us back to our true power. We cannot come into our true power while we are still bogged down with the old. Some people are stuck in a history that they cannot rectify. They become angrier and more depressed. It's like being stuck in a bog, right? But there is a process involved in moving on and letting go. And Andy, just for you and anybody else who's interested, I'm going to let you know some of what it is. And that is forgiveness. Forgiveness is really important. And let me be clear about forgiveness. Some people think forgiveness is forgiving somebody for what they've done and accepting what they've done to us. No, it isn't. Forgiveness, in my experience, in my opinion, forgiveness is accepting what has been done to us and moving on because we can't change it. And that's it. That's what forgiveness entails for me. Accepting that something happened to you, whether that was a bad breakup or somebody who treated you like crap when you were in a relationship or whatever, accept it happened and moved on. That person ain't going to change. You don't need to return for a second time. I had an expression that I used to use about why I wouldn't go back to old relationships. And it was like them handing you a gun because it's like you handing them a gun because they missed you the first time, right? So I always try not to go backwards. I always try and go forwards. I'm a fire sign and my instinct is to move forward. But I do appreciate that there's nothing simple about letting go of someone you care about. I do appreciate that, Andy. It can be really, really painful. And the other thing that keeps us stuck in a loop is when we ruminate over things, right? And we repeat over and over and over and over again. Catch yourself when you are repeating things because they will keep you in an old place. And scold yourself, say, no, I've been there, I've done it, time to put it to bed, that's it, time to move on. And there is literally nothing wrong in looking back and saying, oh, I miss that person, right? Because close relationships are huge in our lives. We're pack animals largely, right? Like dogs. They're a huge part of our identity, whether it's a romantic partner, a best friend, or a business partner. When you move on from a relationship, it's painful, it's not easy, but you can learn a lot from it. And but as we know, sometimes parting is absolutely necessary. And I want to talk about some of the signs that are available to us when you need to move on. And one of them is you don't feel like you. Do you know that feeling? When you're in a situation, whether it's a bad job, a bad relationship, bad situation, you don't feel like you anymore. You feel like you're only half existing in that situation. Whenever you come together in that situation, in those circumstances, you're out of touch with yourself. You're out of touch with yourself because you're having to deny who you are and what matters to you in order to be able to cope in that situation. It's time to get back in touch with yourself. Absolutely, it is. Honor yourself. You are important. This applies to all types of relationships. It is. What's this? What's this? Who are you talking about? Oh, Tara said, this full moon has been energy draining for every Pisces I know. My cats are also acting like they're on dope. Look forward to the new beginning, Pisces people. Absolutely. It is. Full moons absolutely impact the people who are born under that sign. I've no doubt about it whatsoever. This is not woo woo. This literally can be scientifically followed and checked. The other way of detecting a sign that you need to move on is you feel emotionally drained. Do you know that feeling where you're like, oh, I always feel tired? This job always makes me feel tired. It's not that the job itself always makes you feel tired. It's what it entails. It's the environment, what you're putting yourself through. It's not for you. And what it will do is it will just break you down. It will cause such low self-esteem. You deserve better. You absolutely do. The mental exhaustion of having to show up day in, day out for something or someone you don't like, you deserve so much better than that. It is time to move on. It absolutely is. And sometimes it's time to move on when people don't apologize for what they do to you, right? They gaslight you. They misremember their actions towards you. They belittle how you feel about it. They talk negatively about you to others, sometimes in your presence, because they set up a triangulation situation, which is very narcissistic. And the thing about that, such people like that, they always find a way to become the victim. Even though you are probably the victim of their behavior, they always find the way to become the victim. So, Andy, tips for moving on. Yes, Gwyneth, battling with the injustice system is tiring, but justice is important. Shug says, eliminate ego and find that baseline honesty for yourself. I love that. I love that. Randy can't really sleep these days. Bless you. HK Very is a Pisces, and this is a Pisces full moon. Had a huge argument with my mum, was awful. Maybe you needed to blow away the cobwebs. Maybe that's the way it was. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if the moon is a rock or not. What's that? I know all about that. I don't know what that's about either. So, tips for moving on. Andy, put yourself first. Yes, we're being taught in this world that putting ourselves first is wrong, is selfish, is greedy, all of those things. No, sod it. You have to put yourself first. It's that old thing, right? If you're in a boat and it's sinking, you have to save yourself first in order to be able to save everybody else, right? So please put yourself first. What you want counts and matters, as long as you're not a sociopath or a psychopath, in which case you need treatment. But for the most part, right, if you're just a good, decent person and it's paining you to move on, put yourself first. And also let yourself grieve. I think people underestimate the importance of letting themselves grieve a situation that is dead or dying. And because it's so huge, the loss of it. It really is. And grief is really important to be able to honor yourself and your emotions about something. And Andy, have you done that? Because if you're still kind of reflecting back in some way, I wonder if you've allowed yourself to fully grieve about the end of the relationship. And seek out support if you need it. And by the way, people, it's 11:11. It's 11:11. Oh, yes, it is. Seek out support if you need it. Anybody, Andy or anybody, because sometimes moving on is a very hard process that can need expert help. Stay busy. Stay as busy as you can. You know, absolutely, you shouldn't avoid your feelings, right? But staying active is a great way to move forward and feel positive. And learn from your mistakes. Andy, none of us are perfect. No, not even me, right? Learn from your mistakes. When and why didn't I advocate for myself more in this situation? Did I treat the other person fairly or unfairly? How could I have responded or reacted differently in certain situations? Do a recce at the end of it. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing at all. Greg said, hope you move on swiftly, Andy. And sometimes you have to consider cutting contact as well with people and situations, because that sometimes is the only way to get away from it. And find your happy place. There is a real bright side to letting go. There's really a light at the end of the tunnel. You get better physical health. You improve your mental health. There is a self-discovery waiting there for you. You may have talents that you're not even aware of. You can explore new relationships. You can find people who are more for you, better friends and partners. You will also gain more confidence by moving on, because honestly, that whole thing, that energy of being caught in the past, it just will deplete your confidence. Because you know what? You deserve the best in life. Why not? Why not? You absolutely do. Hello, London lady. Lol, got stretched now. You got to stretch. Walking is good therapy. Have a great weekend, everyone. Great show as always. Thank you, HK. We're going to leave on that note, but I just want to thank you all for being here today. You are all absolute gems. I am not getting away from here much before 11, after 11, am I, of a morning? But some great quotes, I think, that you need to hear before I leave today. And that is, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. I love that quote. And another one I love, which is from Barbara Sher, which is, when you start using senses you've neglected, your reward is to see the world with completely fresh eyes. But I think this is the quote I have to leave you with today. Mark's Adventures, long time not been here. Hey, Sonia, usually working this time of day. Good to see you still here, full of energy. I'm full of energy. And don't forget, people, send me in your pictures of where you watch Wake Up. And if you've got any videos, send me and I'll whack them on social media, right, of where you watch Wake Up. I'd love to do that. So, final quote for today, and I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful equinox weekend. And that is in 3 words. I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Thank you, Robert Frost, for that. I love you all. Have a fantastic weekend. Lots of love to you. Does this mean that you are now relying on income? Yes, Bijan. Sorry to ask a private question. As you have switched off adverts on YouTube, does this mean you are now relying on income from donations? Yes, absolutely. And I'm very grateful to anybody who's been able to donate this morning. But there's never, ever a pressure to donate, right? Because we're all in this together. One way or another, we will always get around this, people. You know we will. I love you loads. Have a truly fantastic weekend. And I will see you on Monday. Thank you to my magnificent mods. Shin and Zoe, love them loads. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sam and Dilip and Kenneth and Ian. Equinox, great program, 80s, 90s. You're welcome. See how we're living. And amen to that, cat. Love you all. And Marlena, is it Marlana or Marlena? And one thing that's consistent in life is change. Hallelujah to that. See you Monday, folks. Take good care of yourself. Lots of love.